for the next generation of talk radio. It's time for politics, pop culture, and proud pro-American conservatism. Strap yourselves in. Grab your coffee. It's time for the Chris Salcedo Show on AM 700 KSEV, the voice of Texas.
And good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show. Good Friday morning. I've got to tell you, we've had, now you guys didn't notice here on AM 700 KSEV, but we have had studio issues for the last, what has it been, Russell, about a week and a half? And the folks who did notice are our friends over at the Vida Television Network. Guys, this is the first, and I want to welcome you back in, the first new episode you guys have had of the Chris Salcedo Show in almost 2 weeks. Long story short, the connection that connects our remote studio to one of our radio shows went down. The connection went down. The studio was fine. We just couldn't talk to the other studio, and we couldn't move our cameras out of our normal broadcast studio into the replacement studio because it was just configured all wrong. Plus, it was a big white room, number one. It had been terrible visuals, number one. Number two, there was no place to plug in our digital cameras that would interface with any type of computer that would have been in any way streaming that would have looked good. So all of you folks on Vida Television Network have been dealing with reruns, and there are a lot of massive things going on. So I'm glad we're back on track for today. Fingers crossed our connections stay up. This was one that had the engineers scrambling for the better part of 2 weeks. It was one that I got to tell you was and that, don't take this wrong. Our engineers work really, really hard. It had us frustrated on this end because it's one of those things where it seems simple, but it's actually complicated. Why don't you just do this? Trust me, I wasn't stupid enough to say that to our engineers because, you just let the guys do what the guys do. 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. That's our phone number here. So welcome back, Vida Television Network. And boy, you're coming back at a humdinger of a time, I got to say. You all have probably heard by now that Donald Trump, our president, is going to meet with Kim Jong-un before May. That's the word that came down from the White House. The individual who reached out was the crazy fat kid, Kim Jong-un. Reached out to South Korea. South Korea acted as a go-between and made the announcement yesterday at the White House. And I'm going to play all those sound bites for you. But look, I recognize this isn't one of those quote-unquote sexy topics where you're all going to feel comfortable weighing in on denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. As vitally important as it is, I just know this isn't one of those topics where you know how I know? I looked at the Chris Salcedo Show Facebook page, and I posted all this stuff up, and not even 1,000 reaches for the story about North Korea. It's not either A, you've decided to tune out, it's you don't know enough about the topic to credibly weigh in, or it's just not one of those topics where most Americans feel comfortable saying, hey, let me tell you what I think about that. Well, I do feel comfortable talking about it because I've been watching this for an awful long time across several administrations, dating back, to the Clintons. And the Clinton administration was the one that sent us down this rabbit hole to begin with this trust but don't verify business of giving them billions and billions and billions of dollars and then having them continue to take that money, starve their people, and develop nuclear weapons anyway. So I'm a little, I don't trust communists. I just don't. I don't trust the communists in North Korea. I don't trust the communists in Cuba. I don't trust the communists in China. I never have. So when the crazy fat kid who is, and I've got to give you guys some background on this, and maybe I've told this story before. There was a young lady who escaped North Korea into the South, and she had to go through the ringer. It was a long, hard journey marred with abuse, rapes. It was terrible. Once she got there, she still, when they had to deprogram her, basically, because she knew she got out, but she still, since she was a child, was raised to believe the Kim family were gods. And I'm not being rhetorical. I know many of you are saying in the modern age of a country that has nuclear weaponry, its people actually thought of him as a god. And that's exactly what I'm telling you. And they work very hard at perpetuating that myth. So Kim Jong-un is born with a big fat silver spoon in his mouth. The whole kingdom, if you will, is raised by his father. And I can only speculate that they know they're not gods. But he was raised by his father. Yes, we're not really gods, but they think we are. And that's the important thing. So and threats, intimidation, murder, communists, it's what they do. You keep the people in line. So part of it is indoctrination, part of it's fear. And that's how that population lives on a daily basis, not to mention hungry, starving. So I'm a little suspect when a kid who has the proverbial world by the tail says, oh, now I want to talk about giving up the nuclear weapons that I've spent the better part of 3 decades and conning several presidents to get. Oh, now I want to talk. Now, even the basket of bias press is crediting Donald Trump's bellicose pressure campaign. What do they call him? Rocket Man? Little Rocket Man? They're crediting Trump. All the same people who said that Donald Trump was trying to pick a nuclear war fight with North Korea is now being forced to admit that it's what brought Kim Jong-un to the table. Or did it? Now look, I applaud what Donald Trump has done. And I know there are going to be a lot of other talkers who come on the air today are going to say, "Oh, this is great," and Donald Trump has proven the Democrats and the naysayers and the basket of bias press wrong again. And I'll concede that is one angle to this. But as a country, I don't trust. I don't think we should trust the North Koreans. And even though the signaling coming out of the White House is they will not take off their foot off the gas pedal on these heavy sanctions they've imposed on North Korea. And they'll not give up on the rhetoric and they'll not give up on the pressure campaign. Still, I know there's going to be a temptation to do just that. If you'll just show us some good faith. No. The United States of America is not the one that has to show the good faith here. That's North Korea's job. Every single time these cats have conned an American president, the American president has listened to those brainiacs over at the State Department. State Department says, oh, they want to talk. Yeah, just give them billions of dollars and we're on the track to peace. And it turned out to be a con. Every single time. You and I got fleeced. The North Koreans continued to starve their people and build toward a nuclear weapon. And the State Department, oh, well, we tried. We gave peace a chance. No, you were idiots. Full-blown idiots. To trust a regime that has, for almost 40 years, proven themselves to be untrustworthy as far as we Americans are concerned. You were stupid to believe them. So, there is one part of me that would love to see a peaceful resolution to this, to see those people getting fed, to see communism go by the wayside on the Korean Peninsula. And dare I say, a unified Korea one of these days under a democratic banner. I think they'd be a great ally and a great hedge against the Chinese. That's why I think the Chinese aren't very excited about those prospects. They don't want America there. They're already ticked off. We're there with South Korea anyway. So when we get back, we'll play this soundbite from the National Security Advisor of the South Koreans. It's going to be broken English, but you guys will get the gist of it. So I know many of you guys aren't experts on this, and frankly, I'm not either. Let me introduce these key bits of information before we go to break, and that's this. In the last 40 years, the North Koreans have never followed through on an agreement with us. What makes now different? 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. You found the Chris Salcedo Show on The Voice. Friday, everybody. Welcome. Chris Salcedo Show. And it's a rather historic Friday. Look, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer on all of this, but we've been down this road before. Optimism, wild-eyed optimism that, oh, yes, this time the Norks mean it. And let me just give you the facts and I'll get you to weigh in on this. Here's South Korean's National Security Advisor. He steps up to the microphone last night. Again, broken English, but you guys will get the gist of it. Listen.
I'd like to thank President Trump, the Vice President, and his wonderful national security team, including my close friend, General McMaster. I explained to President Trump that his leadership and his maximum pressure policy, together with international solidarity, brought us to this juncture.
Donald Trump's high-pressure campaign, along with unity of the world community, brought us to this juncture, he said. So the international community is also crediting the in-your-face, let's do something different other than kiss North Koreans' rear end and pay them off strategy of the Trump administration. On that point, I think they ought to be applauded.
I expressed President Moon Jae-in's personal gratitude for President Trump's leadership. I told President Trump that in our meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he is committed to denuclearization. Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain.
Okay. Kim Jong-un, the crazy fat kid, is committed to denuclearization. How many of us believe that? I mean, talk about shooting sunshine, folks. Now, I know the South Koreans, they have a big incentive to want to cling on to any hope. They live right next door to this madman. But how many of you, just by knowing what you know about the crazy fat kid and his military buildup since he's been in power, and his father was doing the same thing, don't get me wrong. He's not anything special, just another pot-bellied dictator. But how many of you believe that Kim Jong-un is committed to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula? I don't believe it for a second.
From any further nuclear or missile tests, he understands that the routine joint military exercises between the Republic of Korea and the United States must continue.
Now, that's another point. He understands that the joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea must continue. This has been the number one problem that the North Koreans have said. They don't want America over there. They don't want America training over there. They don't want American military might over there. They certainly don't want our troops in South Korea. And part of that is because China is behind them saying, hey, tell them this, because China doesn't want us over there either. See, this is why I'm suspect about all this. This just smells of the North Koreans trying to get more time to develop their nukes.
And he expressed his eagerness to meet President Trump as soon as possible. President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May.
By May. Look, there are those who say you don't elevate a young dictator. Some are calling into question Kim Jong-un's health. Maybe that's bringing him to the table. I have no idea what the truth is at this point. I just have a lot of suspicion. And Donald Trump is saying, yeah, I'll meet him. But I can tell you his White House is saying, we're not taking the gas off, our foot off the gas pedal on these sanctions until we get something real.
To achieve permanent denuclearization, the Republic of Korea, along with the United States, Japan, and our many partners around the world, remain fully and resolutely committed to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Along with President Trump, we are optimistic about continuing a diplomatic process to test the possibility of a peaceful resolution. The Republic of Korea, the United States, and our partners stand together in insisting that we not repeat the mistakes of the past, and that the pressure will continue until North Korea matches its words with concrete actions.
Yeah, in other words...
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, in other words, don't act like Barack Obama, who saw that our sanctions were working against Iran and said, oh, man, my friends over in Iran, the radicalized Islamic fundamentalist terrorists, they're starting to really hurt. Let me take the pressure off because I don't want my friends over in the People's Republic of Iran to be harmed. We don't do that here. The other partners are in this, of course, Japan, who has a vested interest in making sure nukes aren't developed on the Korean Peninsula. So look, healthy dose of skepticism, I would say. I mean, how about you guys? 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. Bill, welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show. What say you?
Hey, good morning, Chris. You can't trust Hitler, what he did with the League of Nations. You can't trust what Korea did, what Vietnam did, what they did with Saddam Hussein, and you can't trust the Democrats either. I thought I'd throw that one in there too. But the only thing I would say, first, it's not going to happen because this is part of the reason I'm calling. The largest Christian church in the world is in South Korea. And had we not been there, I think it was Dr. Young-E Cho was the founder of it. I think it had close to 1 million people, if not over. And when I would start seeing some things in North Korea, like freedom of religion and freedom of speech and everything like this, so all this is window dressing. In other words, he's just isolating this one aspect of it, but he's trying to keep everything else. He doesn't want you to look at, hey, where's the Christian church? We don't have one. Where's the freedom of speech? We don't have that. And so you're isolating just this one section. It's not going to happen. You can't trust the communists at all.
Well, you know what, Bill, thank you for the call, man. I appreciate it. I'm kind of there, too. I don't trust communists. I have never trusted communists. They lie, just like their cousins in the Democrat Party here in the United States, just like their liberal cousins wherever that ideology permeates the globe. Let me play for you my attitude toward the communist world. This comes from a favorite movie of mine.
But you know how I feel about this. They're animals, Jim. There is an historic opportunity here. Don't believe them. Don't trust them. They're dying. Let them die.
That was Captain Kirk talking about the Klingons. And, of course, anybody you know your sci-fi, the Klingon Empire had received a blow, and here come the good guys, the United Federation of Planets, in this case the United States, trying to bail them out. They're dying. If there is some inkling that the collapse of the North Korean regime is imminent and we can keep those nukes contained, and that's the big if, I'm in that camp. If we can solve this without firing a shot, of course I'm going to favor that. I just don't want to give what Kim Jong-un appears to want, time. And that seems to be what he's stalling for. Back in a minute. It's Chris Salcedo Show. Colonel Tony Schaefer with his opinion on this coming up next.
The voice of Texas.
All right, welcome back, everybody. The Chris Salcedo Show. Hour 2 is underway. Let's have a conversation about the ins and the outs, the bumps in the road ahead. If this is even real as it pertains to North Korea and the crazy fat kids suing for peace is how it's being portrayed. And look, I got to tell you, I'm a little leery when the basket of biased press starts crediting the bellicose nature of our president for these kinds of things. I'm just a little skeptical. Let me bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer. He's CIA-trained former senior intelligence officer, New York Times best-selling author. The latest book is called The Last Line. He's a senior fellow with both the London Center for Policy Research and the Center for Advanced Defense Studies. Colonel, welcome back.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. Good to be on.
Okay. Trump has agreed to meet with Kim Jong-un, undisclosed location. First blush, what do you think?
I think it's the basement of Hillary's house, by the way, the undisclosed location. That's a joke, Chris, by the way.
Right, with the servers.
I shouldn't be saying it. Shouldn't be saying it. No. So anyway, look, I'm skeptical as you are, Chris. Look, yeah. I've dealt with this North Korean issue for a long time, since I was a very young operative. And I was just talking to Jim Woolsey about this, former director of CIA, over the issues of what they failed to do. And Jim and I had we were on the train together going to New York, and we had a very, very frank, direct conversation about this. And Jim admitted to me, and I don't think he minds me saying this, that they made a lot of miscalculations in '94 regarding what the North Koreans would or would not do when we entered into the first agreed upon framework regarding the nuclear program. Yeah. So I think, my primary advice to the president, if he listens, is trust but verify. You've really got to examine everything they say with a fine-tooth comb, because if they can find any wiggle room, they'll use it. And if you don't plan in appropriate verification mechanisms for any agreement, they will surely find a way to essentially go around and do something that you don't want them to do. So I'm skeptical, but again, I'm hopeful. So
right, something straightforward like an American and United Nations team will accompany every one of your engineers as you pull the plug and bury your nuclear reactors. Something like that.
Something like that, and then also something in the way of realistic penalties. I mean, one of the things notable about every agreement we've made with the North Koreans, Chris, is that they get everything, we get nothing, and there's no real method of punishment if they do something wrong. We built them nuclear power plants, we gave them food for their people, and then the moment they violate something, it's like, we've got nothing. We've got no hammer other than just basically taking what we've already given them, and then usually China steps in to help them anyway. So, Again, we've got to be smarter than the last 3 times we've done this sort of thing with the North Koreans. And most importantly here is, I would like to believe the president, because he has shown the so-called bellicose verbiage he's used, that he's serious. And everything that indicates to me from my contacts with the Pentagon's ready to go to war. And they really are. And so we have to maintain that as a hammer, saying if you do not want to work with us, if you continue to, act inappropriately, there will be a penalty, and that penalty will be severe to you as the great leader.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, CIA-trained former senior intelligence officer, and a New York Times best-selling author, our guest right now. I got to ask, and maybe some of your contacts have explored this. Why now? Why are we to believe that Kim Jong-un is all of it after he's this close to successfully mounting a miniaturized nuclear device atop an ICBM? Why now does he want to talk? This just smells of trying to buy more time to where they can get this mounting of that miniaturized device perfected.
There's 2 reasons, and one is I will allude to the fact that we have, I think, more capability to influence thinking than we acknowledge. And so I think there's been some really deft information operations that have been going on. I mean, again, the American public doesn't see everything we do, so I'll just leave it at that. Secondly, the North Koreans actually had a very muted response when they saw the Hawaiian panic. I don't know if you recall a few weeks ago when they had the false alert.
Yeah.
The North Koreans did not pile on. And I think the North Koreans recognized, oh, my goodness, if there's a miscalculation and we get blamed for something, we're going to get hammered. So I think, again, when you personalize this, make sure that Un understands that if something goes wrong, we're coming after you. It's all about him. It's all about the guys at the very top of the regime. They could care less about their people. So you've got to reinforce constantly, you're going to be held personally accountable for anything bad that goes wrong. And I think they really worried, oh my goodness, if we get blamed for something, and we may well get attacked because of the change of posture. So I do go back to President Trump's more aggressive stance regarding any response to North Korea than any of his predecessors.
I know this is probably wading into some waters you may not or may be comfortable with. I don't know. I've never talked to you about this, but I am struck by every single president that's had to work a deal with the Norks that the State Department steps in, and no matter how many times you could put in a great, and I don't believe Rex Tillerson is this guy, but you could put in a great, solid conservative guy who wants to make sure that the United States is taken care of, and you put him inside of that cesspool that is the United States State Department, and we end up giving away the store. And you alluded to this earlier, giving away the store with nothing in return for us. I mean, my gut feeling is just keep these career appeasers in the State Department out of it.
Well, you're correct, and this is where, again, I don't hide this fact. I'm mentored, and a lot of my friends are the old Reagan folks, and I've talked to Bud McFarlane about this very issue in Reykjavik and how it took negotiators in the State Department who basically came in from the outside and were appointed as ambassadors from not being ambassadors. Basically, you had to bring in people with spines to take over from the spineless career diplomat. So you were correct. And I think this is something that if I were President Trump, I'd be looking at too, is bringing in outside folks to appoint them as ambassadors and give them the hard task of doing the work to obtain real and lasting agreements.
Yeah, pro-American military men would make my recommendation, and shut the State Department, leave them in the cold. They have been nothing but appeasers to America's enemies for the last 30 or 40 years. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, CIA trained, former senior intelligence officer. The Last Line, that's the title of his latest book. Sir, always appreciate the time and the visit here on the Chris Salcedo Show.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great Friday. Welcome back, everybody, to the Chris Salcedo Show. Let me get a couple of calls in here. 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. Here at the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk about one of the show's biggest points of advocacy, school choice. The reason why I believe that parents deserve to be able to direct where the money that this country and these states have allocated for our children need to go. That's coming up. Don't miss that. 281-558-5738. Mark, what say you?
Yes, I have a different attitude about North Korea.
Sure.
I think maybe these talks may go not good, may go badly, but what may happen is that China may come in and try to save the day. Now, I did business in China from 1988 to 1992, and it's kind of kept up with it. But I think China's going to come in there, and whether it's behind the scenes or out in the open, they're going to say they're going to try to relieve the tension on the Korean Peninsula by rolling in North Korea into a province of China, taking the nuclear weapons out of the peninsula, and come in and develop North Korea to help the starving people and this type of thing. I just think that's good publicity for them. I think South Korea, of course, will be against it. They want to reunite the peninsula. But
right.
You also, it's been, 64 years or so since the war? A lot of the people are dead. They don't know anything about a united Korean peninsula. And South Korea has outpaced North Korea so badly that incrementally developing it, as China would do, it would be a great thing. Now, it gives China more land, plus it also would be able to show up South Korea as the shining city there.
Well,
so that's kind of my opinion.
Well, Mark, I think that I'm not sure how viable that outcome is, but I will say that you're spot on, that China is in the background like a puppeteer pulling the strings. I have no doubt in my mind that the reason why Kim Jong-un is to the table is because the Chinese wish it. If they didn't wish it, he wouldn't be going. And that's number one. Number two, Mark, you're spot on that the Chinese are trying to figure out a way to edge, no matter what happens, to edge the United States out and to keep that section of the world to themselves, their sphere of influence, if you will. So how it's all going to play out, I think, is anybody's guess. And your scenario is as plausible as any. But I know one thing. I don't trust communists, and I don't trust the Chinese, and I don't trust the North Koreans.
Of course, you can't trust them, but that is a goal of China. And this would, believe me, most of the world would stand behind there. They would say, look, okay, we're taking the tension out of the Korean Peninsula. They're going to stop the starvation of these people. This will make a good publicity stunt for China worldwide. But it is their ultimate goal is to, number one, gain more land, just like they've done with the man-made islands out there, just like they did with Hong Kong, Macau. And the ultimate goal is Taiwan, but that's going to be an incremental thing in years to come. But this is their goal, and they will look most of the world, they will look at that as a savior.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for the call, man. I appreciate it. I know that you visited the region, so thank you very much for the insight. And, and about what he mentioned about the South China Sea, the agenda with building up those islands there, folks, which you have to understand, that's not for land. That's for military dominance. And the problem with that is $5 billion a year of commerce goes through there. Did I say, is it billion or is it trillion? Well, it's a lot of money. Last time I looked it up, it could have been trillion, to be honest with you. There's a lot of commerce that goes to the Pacific Rim. And having a country illegally militarize those shipping lanes, which is what China is attempting to do, could hold the U.S. economy and many other economies hostage. And we ought not allow that to happen. 281-558-5738. Hello, Trenton. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show. What do you say?
Good morning. I don't believe Trump will allow that to happen. He's too intelligent. He's a businessman. He's a successful businessman. He knows what's going on, in my opinion.
Now, allow what to happen specifically? No, Trenton. What did you believe he wouldn't allow to happen?
For North Korea to become anything, he is going to the meetings when he meets with Kim Jong-un, and he will not allow anything. He is a businessman. He knows what he's doing. He has intelligence in his cabinet that know what they're doing. I believe in Trump. He is not. No. America's going to win.
Well, you know what? I think for the first time in a long time, Americans realize we have someone in the White House, and this goes beyond political affiliation, someone in the White House who is going to not feel guilty about putting America first, is not going to feel guilty about America winning in the end, who is not going to listen to so-called experts at the State Department, who is actually going to put America in first position, or at least to get as much benefit out of any arrangement as does, in this case, the North Koreans.
Exactly. Agree 100%.
Yeah, and I feel secure about that. I just don't, what I'm afraid of, Trenton, and maybe you're not because you believe in Trump, but I've seen this play out so many times to where, somebody for example, the tariffs. Trump was all ready to go for the tariffs. They finally rolled out what they were, and they were nowhere near as biting. The stock market goes, oh, thank God. They breathe a sigh of relief, and its stock market closes up yesterday because he exempted Canada and he exempted Mexico for now. So what I'm worried about is inappropriate softening when what got us to the table was Trump's approach. What I'm saying is what got us here was Trump's approach. Don't change it. Does that make sense? 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. And I'd really like to meet the guy who says, well, you know what? Okay, we got Kim Jong-un to the table. Now it's time to behave like the Brits. Now it's time, with apologies to our cousins over in Great Britain. I should have said Europe in general. And as a matter of fact, Great Britain is probably still the strongest strongest legs in the European Union. Soon to be not in the European Union. But you all get my gist. I don't want to go weak in the knees on this one. I don't think we can afford to. Because every single time it's come to decision-making time, the United States has gone weak in the knees every single time. And look what we've got. A nuclearized Korean peninsula. And a crazy fat kid on the cusp of getting nukes. Deliverable nukes. Some stories from yesterday I wanted to get out to you guys. The Connecticut governor has called the National Rifle Association a terrorist organization. His name is Daniel Malloy. He has said the NRA is acting like a terrorist organization for standing up for your Second Amendment rights. Well, and just to be clear, those who are the quote-unquote NRA are the 5 million members and the countless millions more who support the NRA. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that National Rifle Association membership is through the roof, courtesy of idiot liberals like Daniel Malloy. Calling those who believe in the right of self-defense terrorists. Well, that's what Democrats do, isn't it? I mentioned this article a couple of days ago. This article from the New Yorker, which, among other things, showed that Barack Obama didn't want to stop or make a big deal out of Russia's attempted interference in our election because he didn't want to taint Hillary Clinton's win. Well, there's something else that came out of this as well, this New Yorker piece. The DNC hacked involved Russian agents, but they were Russian agents who were working inside of the Democrat National Committee. This is a pretty big bombshell. Now I've told you that the Democrats and the libs have a history of working with the Soviets, have a history of working with the Russians, because ideologically a lot of the leadership are still communists, and they have a lot in common, the communists and the Democrat Party in America. But if it turns out that the New Yorker piece has any credibility, and it's a left-wing publication, so you've got to take it, you got to be skeptical. But that the individuals who were working inside of the DNC were in fact Russian agents who wanted to disrupt our elections. Katie, bar the door. If that can be proved, if that can be put in front of the American people with definitive evidence, Katie, bar the door. That it was, and we've long suspected that it was Democrats colluding with Russians, not anybody else, is the reason why we're going through these 2 years of turmoil since the election. Yesterday, we mentioned to you guys Louis Farrakhan. Now, for those of you who don't know who Louis Farrakhan is, he's a racist bigot who runs the Nation of Islam. And he's a vehement anti-Semite. He's a Jew hater. Now, this has become a problem. Remember I told you yesterday that the basket of biased press won't ask Democrats why they continue to have a relationship with Louis Farrakhan, somebody who hates Jews. The pressure campaign is starting. And even though ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN have not, well, actually, I shouldn't say CNN because Jake Tapper has done something with this. But the rest of them know. Planned Parenthood, one of its chapters, cut ties with one of the Women's March organizers. Actually, 2 of them, who have connections with Louis Farrakhan. Finally, after the pressure built and built and built and built, the women's co-chair, Tamika Mallory, and of course, Linda Sarsour, the woman whose name literally means the cockroach. They have finally been repudiated by the so-called Women's March because of their love and affinity for an anti-Semite, a Jew hater. And lastly, remember we told you yesterday that the guy in charge, the second guy in charge of the Democrat National Committee, his name is Keith Ellison. He's buddies with Louis Farrakhan. he came out and said, "Oh, the Democrats don't care that I'm involved with an anti-Semite, that I coordinate and plan and plot with an anti-Semite." Well, it's not just him. There are members of the the Communist Black Caucus who are also buddies with Louis Farrakhan. One of them is right here in Houston. I'll tell you about that coming up after we talk about school choice. Chris Salcedo Show here on the Voice of Texas. Thank you, lady. Appreciate it. Okay, folks, let's get to our next guest. Her name is Stacey Hawk. She's a philanthropist, public policy activist, business owner from Austin. She serves as chair of the board of Texans for Education Opportunity and actively works to advantage high-quality education options for families, students, and educators right here in the great state of Texas. Stacey, welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I got you. Thank you very much for being here. Look, after the primaries, I think it's safe to say that those who believe in the fundamental rights of parents to choose the best way to educate their children, there have been some advances. There were some defeats, to be sure. But I am a little more hopeful that something in this regard might get done. And I'll state what my show's position has been, and then I want to get your take on what school choice means to you. But long story short, we believe that the money should follow the student, and the sole determinant, the only person or persons qualified to judge how that student is educated are the parents. So we believe that will introduce a competitive element that is lacking right now inside of government-run education. What do you think?
Well, I agree with everything you just said. And the good news is, we have some evidence to support that belief. We are seeing it work well for students in other states who find that they're better served with different options and models. And the other thing is, we know now, more than we've ever known, that children are unique and learn differently and are served well by different models. So it is time.
Right. And I don't know, well, I do know, but so many of what I not so lovingly refer to as educrats. The reason why educrats don't go into the all of the above approach, that they want to basically force parents to pay for a school system that the parents have very little input on shaping.
Well, yes, public education evolved over time and it still has the same underlying goal, which is for all of us collectively to contribute to providing for an education for the public. And that is a public good. It's
right.
Something we believe would equip our citizenry. So I think those goals are still there. Over time, the framework by which we distributed that good has sort of taken over and become the dominant factor in the conversation rather than the underlying goal in the first place.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because this is my experience. Every single time you get into a conversation with the educrats, their first priority is preserving government-run education. That's their not educating children, but basically propping up and preserving the institution. Their number one priority is to keep the government-run system going. And that is just like every single government program or every single government department throughout the government. It lives to perpetuate itself, not to accomplish its mission. And you called it an evolution. I call it a devolution, because, frankly, the job is to educate kids. But many educrats in the state of Texas and all over this country believe their number one job is to preserve a failed system.
Well, like I said, there's good news on the horizon, and that is you cannot stop progress, no matter how hard you try. So if your goal is simply to avoid change out of some sort of protectionist measure, or because change is hard, history says you can't hold it back forever.
There was I'll share something else with you here really quickly. Stacey Hawk, everybody, philanthropist, public policy activist, and a business owner in Austin, Texas, and she's chair of the board of Texans for Education Opportunity. There was a Breitbart article that came out by Breitbart, Texas. I don't know if you saw this, but they were down on school choice, and one of the reasonings that they had put in was, well, to be quite frank, the fact that so many of these school districts around the state, the number one employer is the school system, and the adults. The adults would lose out because if parents somehow had some sort of a choice, they would take their kids elsewhere. But then they made this argument, and I want to read it to you, which kind of undermines their previous argument. He says, but now these guys come in and say, well, we want to support school choice, which I do as well. But then they loop in what they call a voucher program where every Texan receives $6,000 to $8,000 to decide where their kids go to school. That works for 10 Texas counties, but does not work for a majority of the rural counties where there is no charter school and no private school to choose from. So on one hand, they're saying, well, they're afraid that all this money is going to flow out of these small communities that where education serves as a jobs program for adults. But then they say, well, there's no place for these people to go in rural communities. You can't have it both ways, right?
That is true. That is true. You know, there's a couple of things that are false there. I mean, one is that we are seeing that there are small private schools in most rural communities. Those already exist, more than people give it credit for. But I think they are right in that whether it's the rural or the urban communities, change is slow. So even when Texas does make an offering, we're not going to see some sort of mass transition overnight. That's not realistic.
Sure.
People, who are most in need will look around, and if there's a better option for them, some of them will try it out. And then that will feed on itself. And over time, exactly what you said, market pressures will, have everyone focusing a bit more on student outcomes and serving students, and should lead to raising everyone's boat. And the institutions and the organizations and the schools and the offerings that don't well serve the market will diminish, and the ones that do an excellent job will grow the fastest. And that's just what we see across a wide variety of industries, and education is no different. We're seeing that it's just so ripe for innovation, not just with technology, but with different teaching models, with different structures as far as the day goes, with how people access space and information and are connected, and even with what the school year looks like, that is leading to better learning.
Yep.
For no more money.
Yeah, the current system doesn't lend itself to innovation. The current system is old, antiquated, dilapidated, and of course, government-centered, which I believe hampers it significantly. Stacey Hawk is our guest right now. She serves as chair of the Board of Texans for Education Opportunity. And that leads us to the last point, and another contradiction that our opponents on this, they often say, well, if you give parents a choice, that means that money will flow out of government-run education. And then in the next breath they say, our schools are so fantastic that nobody in their right minds would ever leave. And it's like, again, another contradiction. Well, if you're doing such a fantastic job with the money with, by the way, the record amount of money that you're given, because nobody gives more money per capita to each student than the United States of America for lesser outcomes. We're not competitive on the world stage anymore. Our kids are middle of the pack and falling. If you believe that your institution is so great, then why are you afraid of a little competition?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, Texas today has gotten to the point that the public school system spends more on average per student than it costs on average for students to go to private school. And the private schools are outperforming. Now, there's lots of reasons why that may be, but the money is not the barrier. I think arguably we can show that it's not the barrier. We're seeing, especially within the charter community, schools with less access to funds outperforming very consistently, significantly their peers, their neighborhood peers, with the exact same student population. So I think you're right. It's really about unleashing educators to do their thing and to serve their students well, and empowering families to find the right choice and fit for their students.
Yeah, I'd love to see teachers compensated, good teachers compensated for what they do. Right now, they're pigeonholed. They're paid. Good teachers are paid as much as teachers out there who just mail it in. It's what you get when you get a socialized government-run program rather than a competitive program that pays you what you're worth. Stacey Hawk, everybody, philanthropist, public policy activist. She's chair of the board of Texans for Education Opportunity. Lady, I appreciate you being here on the Chris Salcedo Show.
Thank you, Chris. It was a pleasure.
That is the question before you, ladies and gentlemen. Do parents deserve a choice in how to best educate their children? 281-558-5738. Or do you side with the educrats that parents should be denied a choice? 281-558-5738. 281-558-KSEV. Your opinions coming up next. And that's going to do it here for the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide on the Vida Television Network. I want to remind everyone that I think I'm one of the few individuals on television who actually allows you to directly interact with me, unfiltered, live. All you got to do is call AM 700 KSEV 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV from the hours of 7:30 a.m. Eastern until 10 o'clock Eastern, and let your voice be heard. Maybe you don't think we covered something fairly, or maybe you don't think we've covered something enough. It's your chance to weigh in. You can also do so via social media. Go to chrissalcedo.com. All of our contact information is there. Or you can do it live in real time during those same hours at Chris Salcedo TX. Even off hours, we respond to Twitter, and it's a good chance if you make a compelling argument, it'll be featured on the show if I'm not on the air at the time the following day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida Television Network. We'll see you next time.